Hello, everyone. Welcome to Syncromystic Episode 8. I'm Wayne McRoy, and this is Richard Willett, and together we're going to take apart the Syncromystic metadata that we see out there in the greater zeitgeist, and we're going to connect the dots in some current news events, and we're going to trace it back to the things that are so important in this world, the things that are truly going on, and we're going to show you the hidden messaging involved in everything, every aspect of our culture, and especially within media. Welcome, Richard. Good to see you, my friend. How are things on your end?
All good, all good. Tired as you are. You've got 5 children. I've got two, and I don't know how you juggle all of that going on. But this was fascinating, wasn't it? And I reached out to you, said we've got to cover this Ark of the Covenant. Apparently, they found it, and then when I looked at this, and I was like, okay, the timing of it with Donald Trump apparently having a replica in Mar-a-Lago and all this messianic stuff that we talk about a lot coming together, it fits in perfectly with the timing of that. Obviously, then you had the Egyptian pyramid stuff that you mentioned off air, which we'll get into as well. Which actually, a chap called Josh Sigerton actually went and saw these things and documented this 8 years ago. So this isn't new information at all. But as you say, these are things are put out at the right time, the right purpose. You said at the start of the year they'll start doing this, and we'll get into that. So they've apparently located the Ark of the Covenant, including to the CIA, in the late 80s. But when you really look at the article, it doesn't say they located it and found it. They say that they used remote viewing to find it. Now this fits in with the Montauk project, which has connections to the Kabbalah and the Chabad and Brooklyn, Manhattan, New York. All of that area seems to be deeply involved with this, and Ghostbusters. And I think that a lot is going on here that we need to unpack in terms of the actual metadata, as you call it, synchronistic metadata, and the twilight language, which is a term I love, underneath all of this, because it's not what it seems. They didn't find it. A man described it, and they believed him. So, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying I'm cautious to believe the fella.
Well, here's what it is, and this is actually a program that goes back to the CIA-funded Stargate project. There's Stargate circulating in the media once again. Like I said, the synchromystic tells are there. It's all the connections. Well, this was the CIA Stargate program, which was ostensibly a psychic program within the CIA to find intelligence information, and they used remote viewers to do so. And this was a big project. So, as a sub project under this Stargate project, we had this project Sunstreak, which, from what I understand, I have the actual document in front of me for it. It was declassified in the year 2000. This project happened in 1988, according to what I have here. December 5th, 1988 is when this report was made of this target that they selected for the remote viewers. So they got this remote viewer, and it doesn't disclose which remote viewer this was, who this was within the project, but they told him certain specific things. Then he was given this target and wasn't told what the target was. And this is one of the ways that they operated this Stargate program. They would tell somebody some very vague information about what they were looking for, and then they would have this person use the remote viewing apparatus to do so. Now, they've come up with different ways to help people with this remote viewing. They trained people how to do this, and they actually used some technologies to help people. And one of the technologies they used was called HemiSync. And this goes back to the Monroe Institute, where they will use binaural beats in each ear to help relax the human being and connect both sides of the brain in order to visualize better in this remote viewing aspect of things. So they have scientific documentation. They have evidence that this really works and helps. So they had some people that they trained to do this remote viewing, and the target they gave them was the Ark of the Covenant. But the person doing the remote viewing didn't realize that. At least that's what the claim is. So when they went and they did the remote viewing, they came up with a couple details about where this was located at the time and what the target was, and they described it as a box within a box, and they actually gave drawings and stuff here right in the documentation, and people could look this up. This is public on the CIA's website. It was approved for release in the year 2000, some 12 years later, after the program was ostensibly shut down. But I could almost guarantee you the intelligence community has some similar program still going, because they gathered real intelligence with some of these remote viewing sessions that they had done. And actually, this Stargate project used known psychics that were popular out in the mainstream culture, like Ingo Swann, to visualize certain things. And they actually used him and claimed that, as another project within this Stargate program they did, that he remote viewed Mars way back thousands and thousands of years ago, or even millions of years ago, and there was a civilization there, and he was able to make some hits on that. So they make these claims, and this is all from the CIA. So, like, if you think maybe there's nothing to this, or you think governments aren't interested in using psychic research, or using some of this synchromystic type metadata in performance of operations, I think you're mistaken. The fact that the CIA takes this stuff seriously and had whole programs devoted to this is proof positive that they take this stuff seriously and they know about it. So we have all of that along with that. But back to the main focus here, that's Project Sunstreak. They gave this person the target, which was the Ark of the Covenant. They didn't tell them what it was, and this person came up with details about not only what it looks like and gave drawings and stuff, expressing what the cherubim on top of it looked like, and they described them as seraphim in their notes here. They got the target, like totally, they got the target right, and they also made drawings and gave some indications as to a possible location. And the location they gave was very vague. It's somewhere in the Middle East. There were mosques that they were able to visualize, and it doesn't really give you any answer. So even if they're claiming they found it, they really didn't find it. They just have a general idea where it could be. And that would be somewhere in the Middle East. Now, if you go back and you look, there's been claims for the longest time that the Ark of the Covenant is actually located somewhere in Ethiopia.
Yep.
So it could be there, could be somewhere else. The point is, nobody really knows. They just claim to have had some positive hits on this target with this remote viewing project that they did. So this is a giant nothing burger, but it's brought to the attention of the masses for a reason right now. And this is where the synchromystic metadata idea comes in, because they're trying to invoke some of these ideas and some of these archetypes to bring them into the public mainstream, to bring them into the zeitgeist, into the greater information field out there, because this is all for programming purposes. It's all about programming the minds of the masses. So they want us to ruminate on these ideas. The fact that maybe they found the Ark of the Covenant, which has been associated by people who study this for a long time as some type of a free energy device. And now we'll make the crossover to the discoveries, the alleged discoveries that they're claiming to have made underneath the pyramids in Egypt. They're claiming that they found these columns, these 8 columns and 2 cubes. 2 cubes. Didn't we do a show about 2 cubes, Richard? Underneath.
Yeah, black and a white one, not too long ago, wasn't it? And combining the two into one, the shimmering darkness. Yes, we did.
Well, there's a lot of claims out there in the conspiracy research community that the pyramids are some type of a free energy device. And they're finding these things allegedly, ostensibly underneath the pyramids. They're finding this entire complex underneath that may back up those ideas. Of course, the data they're producing to show this is questionable at best, because what they've done is they've taken some kind of a radar image from space that doesn't have an awful lot of credibility to it. And they've applied new computer software to render models on that. And they're using this as the basis of their claims for this stuff. But it's been all over social media. It's been all over the place. And people are really speculating about this complex underneath the pyramids. that there's really something there. And maybe there is. I don't know. I don't have the answer. But the data that they're presenting and trying to like put this out there in the mainstream scientific literature to make these claims, it's kind of a faulty foundation to build that premise on because the data doesn't represent it. It's just an interpretation via some new computer model that they used. Is it accurate? Nobody could say for sure. They haven't really dug down there and found this. It's just based on topography, radar imaging topography at this point, which is speculative at best. And they've rendered this model. And now this story's out there circulating. But where does this draw the human mind? And this is the important thing. Back to the Egyptian iconography, back to the Middle Eastern and the ancient Jewish, Judaic iconography. Free energy, Egypt, the Ark of the Covenant, drawing all these ideas together because it's an archetype. If you could follow the connect the dots sequence of the synchromystic metadata, they're drawing people's minds to that connection. And it's about the Egyptian iconography. Once again, now, just a day or two ago, I saw in the news cycle another Egyptian hit in the synchromystic metadata field. Well, apparently there was some kind of a submarine accident. I don't know if you saw that in the news cycle, Richard.
No, didn't know.
In Egypt, one of the major hotels there in Egypt, called Sinbad, by the way, the Sinbad Hotel, they had a tourist submarine that had some type of an accident, and 6 people died. Out of 50 people on the submarine, they rescued 44, always the double encodings of the numbers with stuff like that. But 6 people died, and they're doing an investigation into what exactly happened on this tourist submarine from the Sinbad Hotel in Egypt. So we have all of this Egyptian metadata out there, once again, drawing our attention to that area of the world. And of course, the Ark of the Covenant is famously connected with the story of the Exodus from Egypt. So we have that iconography out there. And why are they trying to utilize this iconography in the way that they are? Well, they're focusing our attention on these Egyptian icons and symbols because this is their programming language that they've chosen for the year 2025. So they're revealing secret cues one to another to anybody with eyes to see. Now, what exactly is the message here? I don't know. I'm still trying to decipher that. Maybe there's other people out there that could help to draw the connection of the dots with this. But it has something to do with free energy, apparently. And that would be my speculation here. Some type of an energy type initiative that they're looking at. And maybe it has to do with this Stargate project, the AI project as well that they're doing, because once again, they're drawing people's attention to Stargate because of this project Sunstreak. So I know maybe this is a bridge too far for some people and they'll say it's a coincidence, but it's not a coincidence. The information's out there in the greater information field. You see it all around you. And I had actually pointed this out in the beginning of the year when they started all the nonsense right at the New Year's celebration. So we could see all of these things being brought to bear into the zeitgeist or the public consciousness here. They're affecting people's minds with these archetypes in certain ways, and they're communicating one with another using this system program language, which harkens back to the Egyptian iconography once again. So I know that's a mouthful, and I would love to hear your thoughts, Richard.
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? Bringing up this, you can see the blocks of the world moving around now. So, and I've been looking into the Ark of the Covenant. So you mentioned the Ethiopia as well. So just quickly touch on that. So there was alleged stories that it was found in Ethiopia, but I mean, there's no proof of that, even though it existed anyway. But that did lead to a Christian church being robbed and ransacked, and 750 people being shot and killed when they were trying, other militants were trying to find it. So people are taking this stuff seriously around the world. I think it was 2014, a long while ago. But regardless, 750 people were killed in Ethiopia, where people were trying to, I believe, get hold of that that they believed was there. So that's in Ethiopia. We also have the is it the Ethiopian Bible that still has a lot of the stuff in it that's not in the King James version. I believe, Book of Enoch and things like that.
Yeah, there's different iterations of the Bible, and I think the Ethiopian church, the mainstream Ethiopian church there that claims to maybe house the Ark of the Covenant, has this different Bible version that they use. There's a couple different versions that are circulated there. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely more to the story than what's being told.
Yeah, absolutely. And then part of this whole situation with this remote viewing, this Project Streak, that ties in for me into the Montauk project. I've spoken to Stuart Swerdlow many times. He's known David for a long time. He talks about being part of that. That's what he claims. That was something that's happening near Brooklyn in Manhattan. Their area is buzzing with this connections here with the Chabad lot, the Messianic guys. All of this stuff is happening around New York, Brooklyn, that area, Manhattan, Seagate. Epstein lived in Seagate, which is right on, well, literally on the sea, but it's a gated community. And what I didn't realize until last week, I thought there's a Chabad connection with Epstein. I found one in the Seagate. There is a Chabad monastery, like an education school, right across the road, pretty much from where he lived as a child. He was brought up right across the road from the Knesset Israel in Seagate, gated community. So, and they've got a large Chabad community there just around the corner. They've got this education center. So, you know, two and two together, you come up with Jeffrey Epstein connected to Chabad Lubavitch. But it's quite clear that there's something going on here with this messianic stuff that we're talking about, that twilight language. Also, there's something going on with the underground element. Looking underground keeps
Absolutely.
coming up. Keeps coming. I've been talking about it in New Mexico for a long time in terms of Trementina base, Zorro Ranch being connected, in my belief, I could be wrong, but I believe Zorro Ranch, Trementina base, which is the Church of Spiritual Technology, Dulce base, which I don't know whether that's I say that there is obviously a Dulce base there, but sometimes the 7 levels, that seems to fit too nicely in the Kabbalah and the what's the 7 levels of hell? I forget what that's called, Dante's Inferno. That all fits in too nicely for me. But I do believe there's a lot going on underneath New Mexico, and you've got Los Alamos National Laboratory there as well. So I believe they've been doing a lot of this underground. When you look at the Kabbalah, when they talk about World War III, it looks like they're going to go and live underground. These occultists and like in their own ark, their own safe Garden of Eden. And someone I work with, Christopher John Biotis, and you've spoken about similar things as well, talks about Greenland being a main part of this in terms of, and we know they have a city under the ice called Camp Century, which was an old camp, and that has to do with nuclear technology. So these things keep coming up. Underground bases, nuclear technology, and the occult go hand in hand. And I think Stargates as well, in terms of breaking the veil into a different reality. There is something they're trying to do. I'm not saying they've managed to do it, but that I believe that consistently this keeps coming up. And Rosemary's Baby and the Messiah, this messianic age, all just keeps coming together. Rome falling, part of what these transhumanist guys seem to want to do, is part of the Israelites getting their, attacking Rome, the West. The US has been drawn in now, on the side of Russia, but they're both Habadniks, Trump and Netanyahu, and Putin as well. They want to try and take over Canada, which would link them in nicely with Greenland, and then the West would be surrounded by Habadniks. So the West would fall because they'd be surrounded, and that would be. I mean, in the West, I talk about Europe. I mean, but obviously the US will be sacrificed as Donald Trump is telling you. He is the sacrificial lamb. He's telling you through coded images on his son's Twitter that he is the scapegoat. So they're dragging the US down with them as part of dragging the whole entire West down. This major moves going on here, and people don't realize there's a whole playing out of the biblical text behind this. And that's what's frustrating, that people miss any of that. They go on geopolitics. It's not about that. It is about that, but that's a function to this deeper stuff. And then even deeper stuff is what you talk about, putting this metadata out there in the psychology of people. And I think it has something to do with, and I'll get your take on this, egregores, putting that image out there and people making it come about if enough people believe it. Even at the basic level, people start acting out anyway. We saw in COVID, people started to act out as if COVID was real, thus the panic was there anyway, regardless if there was any real reality to it. So this egregore of this end times, I feel like they're trying to stir this pot up. and make it happen. I'll get your take on that, but this seems all to be part of that as well. This Ark of the Covenant under Egypt pyramids, all of it underground, and making these prophecies. And you know that I don't believe in the prophecies. I think that they're coming about. We have different views on that, but it's these people are clearly fostering that ideology or that narrative in people's minds now quickly.
Well, certainly we have just so much going on, like you said, on all of these connections. Let me first string together a couple ideas and connect a few dots from some of the things that you've said there. First of all, you've attached Epstein to Seagate. Well, Seagate can be correlated directly to Stargate. You see the language always present there. And of course, they've drawn a lot of attention to these underground structures or these things going on underground or behind the scenes. We have those tunnels in New York, as we've discussed. We have this major complex under the pyramids that they're talking about now. Whether it really exists or not is another thing altogether. And we do have these deep underground military bases, which have been admitted to. I mean, these certainly do exist. There's a lot of them, they're interconnected. And we have all of these different things going on, and you related it to the Montauk Project. And I'll once again make another connection back to Montauk because I think that's a portion that's important here to a lot of this. Montauk. Well, this was represented in a popular Netflix television series called Stranger Things. You remember that?
Yeah.
And what is the basis of the television series Stranger Things? The existence of this other underground type realm that exists that they call the Upside Down, and it's all about the inversion principle. And this is what these people are all about. It's the upside down, it's the underground structures, it's the studies into free energy and psychic phenomenon and all of that stuff, the Stargate, the Seagate, all of these things. And of course, it's about the abuse and trafficking of children, as was shown in the Stranger Things television show. Revelation of the method, if you want to call it predictive programming, it's all out there. These are all things and projects that have gone on. And of course, you could link the Chabad to the tunnels in New York where they were allegedly trafficking children as well. We have all of this stuff going on. And of course, the connection to Epstein and his involvement in this genetic engineering of people in this whole moonchild type phenomenon, the Rosemary's Baby phenomenon. All of these things connect. If you could connect the dots in the synchromystic field out there, what I call the zeitgeist, you begin to see these connections and it opens up a deeper understanding or viewpoint of the world around you as to what's going on. And of course, you could link this directly to the political machinations of international politics right now as well. The connections are certainly there, and we're seeing a lot of chess pieces being moved across the board right now. And of course, Trump is central to this. And of course, you had mentioned he understands and he's putting out there that he is a scapegoat. This has always been the case. The president of the United States, any world leader, is a knowing, willing scapegoat for these political machinations that go on. And whether they realize the occult side of this or not is another story altogether, but certainly the occult is always present in all of this. And it does tie back to some of these central figures in the greater power structure here, the highest, most echelons of the power structure in this world. And they're moving the chess pieces and they are engineering things in the direction that has been laid out in the Bible and other places. They're fulfilling these prophecies. Now, does this invalidate the Bible or the prophecies? No. If anything, it validates it all the more. So they know what they're doing and they're using it as a blueprint to move forward. And they know that they're invoking these archetypes in people's minds and they're affecting people's unconscious minds in ways to usher in this thing that they want to build, this panopticon control grid that they want to instantiate in place. And this has everything to do with the advent of transhumanism. As much as I don't want that to be the case with all of this stuff, it's always there. Always ties to these two things, transhumanism and occultism. And they always interconnect because one is the ultimate fulfillment of the other. And that's what they're working towards here. So that's a lot to take in. And I'd love to hear more of what you take away from all of this, Richard.
I've got my kids in the background, so if you can hear them, I do apologize. Um, one thing you mentioned there, this free energy and the flipping of the upside down topsy turvy world, or as you called it as well, January the 6th was topsy turvy day. I got that from you. Your research into that being the Feast of Fools is fantastic. These obviously January 6th were led into that prison and that situation on purpose. End of Saturnalia, I believe it is. And you've done some fantastic research on that, and it all fits in again. This topsy turvy part of it is also Alice in Wonderland, going down the rabbit hole. There's the Kabbalah tree of life and tree of death, where the roots become the leaves and they spin it upside down. That's a massive part of it. But what you mentioned there was really significant, I think, is when you said about the free energy in the earth. We've all heard about this, brings up Nazi connotations, the black sun, the sun that never dies, the sun that always illuminates their underworld all time, 24 hours a day. No wonder they want to go to Greenland, because it's always sunny. They can't sleep. There's a whole point, is that don't want they want to control the light as shining darkness. It's all symbolic. So that black sun symbology is really important to them. That's how they're going to light their underworld, as they live under there for a certain period of time. Perhaps that's why they're going to have it. But there is an element of the Lurianic Kabbalah that wants to flip the inner earth to be the top part, and we, who will be left earth, will be living underground. And then you've got Dante's Inferno, hell, and a lot of these things come from that same concept. But you can see these concepts coming in, can't you? And like, even with the Montauk project, one of the main guys called Stuart Swerdlow, who speaks about it and claims he was part of it. Nice guy, I've spoken to him a few times, but he has a book out called Dark to Light about the Kabbalah. They're clearly, part of this is to do with Kabbalistic understandings. Now, the Kabbalah in of itself is just a way of trying to understand the universe. I'm not having a go at the Kabbalah. There's a spiritual principle there. Like, everything can be used either way. But it's what the Lurianic Kabbalists did with it, the Sabbatean Frankists did with it, and what these Messianic lunatics want to do with those principles is completely delusional. And that's who's behind these politicians. That's who's there with Putin. He met his Chabad Rabbi Lazar, I think his name is, in, I think it was late February, getting his orders. Trump's always there with them. Netanyahu openly pledges allegiance to them. And obviously this is Israel. And it doesn't take much for people to realize that when you say the US moving into Canada or Greenland, you really mean Israel using the US. People know that. They know that they won't come to admit it. Those of America, because they're so pledged to the flag, and they won't admit it to themselves, that they actually are being controlled and used, and they're not the superpower. They are the gun in the hand of Israel that the Israel designed. That's the point. But they won't come to terms with that, and that's their biggest downfall, is ego. It's like, you are being used, and you are gonna that gun's gonna get turned around on you very quickly, and that's what's frustrating for me. I know you can see the same thing. That's on a political level, but you can see how these different layers just play out. Most people don't go any further than the politics, but there's so much more going on there, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This runs way deeper than just the political machinations of all of it. That's just a greater symptom of what's going on. It's all about this occultic push and these belief systems that underlie everything. And you're talking, a lot of the people in control are leveraging these Kabbalistic ideas in this way. This is all part of the secret doctrine that the occult fraternities and secret society groups have kept hidden from the masses from time immemorial, and they use these principles against us. Now, like everything else, this is a kind of a tool, and it could be used or misused. So, knowledge about Kabbalah can be used to understand certain things, or it could be misused to be leveraged against people who don't have the same understanding of things. And it could be said about all these different systems across the board. So that's why it's important that we understand and we explore some of the value in some of these things that they put out there. You see, this secret doctrine permeates all the occult fraternities and secret societies, and it's these people in positions of power in this world that are in control of this world that believe in these things and act upon the principles of these things. So whether or not you believe any of it, you need to understand it, because they believe it, and what they do to act on their beliefs affects all of us. So whether you think it's hokum or not, you need to start taking it seriously. And I would suspect there's something to a lot of these principles. They've been around for a long time, and you can actually see how they leverage this stuff against us. Now, just the example we give, what we're all about here is this synchromystic metadata.
Yeah.
This is one of the tools they use to leverage energies against us and to use this knowledge against us in many ways, leverage it against us. And if we're unaware that that's going on or deny that it's going on, that leaves us more vulnerable. But once you begin to see the patterns emerging, and that's all this really is pattern recognition. When you recognize the pattern and you see, okay, all of a sudden Egyptian iconography has been front and center for since the beginning of 2025. Just when things kicked off in 2025, New Year's celebration down in New Orleans, where a guy plowed his truck through a crowd of people with an Isis flag on the back of his truck. Isis being the goddess of magic in the Egyptian system. This was a signal that they were going to use Egyptian iconography throughout the course of the year 2025 as a programming language of sorts and to communicate one with another. So anybody who has eyes to see could know that. And this has taken me a good part of my adult life to deconstruct and to reverse engineer the way that they use this information in this way. And I think I'm just beginning to get to the very basic understanding of some of the very fundamental precepts to it. So that's why I'm sharing this, because it's important that we could all look at this stuff and decipher what's going on. So they use this as the programming language. And now we see all of these ideas tied to Egyptian iconography, touching on things like the pyramids, free energy, the Ark of the Covenant, which was also largely presented, especially in the mainstream. If you watch the History Channel or something, they claim that the Ark of the Covenant was some type of a battery or a generator, an energy generator, a free energy device of sorts. So if you watch that stuff, and even if you don't necessarily buy into the descriptions they're giving, which by the way, I don't, but they're presenting this idea, and that's the important part. Whether it's true or not is immaterial. And Aleister Crowley has even said this in some of his books where he talks about the functions of magic. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's just putting the idea out there for people's minds to take in. And they've been doing this and setting this up for years and years and years. So that when a lot of people, the people that they would probably consider more informed or intelligent, those that would sit and watch a program on the History Channel, like an Ancient Aliens or something like that, they'll watch and they'll see this and that'll stick with them. They'll remember. I remember when Giorgio Tsoukalos with his big hair was talking about that, and that sticks with people and resonates with people. So you have this notion of free energy, and I see that encoded everywhere right now. It's all about energy, and what are they gearing up for? And you could connect the dots all the way back to the mystery drone sightings and everything else, and all this UFO, UAP disclosure stuff that's quietly going on in the background. It all has to do with free energy, and then this whole complex under the pyramids people are talking about. And another topic that's really been popular in this conspiracy subculture is the notion of Tartaria, which I've taken apart ad nauseum in the past. But a lot of the crux of what's important with that is they claim a lot of these buildings that were built in antiquity were free energy devices of sorts. And there may be an element of truth to that, or maybe not. But the important idea is that they've presented this idea to the minds of the masses. So they're pushing this notion of free energy, free energy, free energy, free energy devices attached to this Egyptian iconography right now. So there's something important there. There's something important going on. And we need to keep our fingers on the pulse of this synchromystic metadata to connect the dots a little further. So they're signaling for something here. Now, what exactly that is, I don't know for sure. But I'm hoping that just by putting this information out there, somebody else out there could maybe connect the dots a little deeper and we could move along our understanding of all of this. So, anyway, I think I got a little off topic, but
No, not
I,
at all. No, not at all. Because what you're talking about there, straight away, the father of free energy would be Tesla. Obviously, now we have the second coming of Tesla, who's the slightly out there, likely autistic Elon Musk. who's not the genius that anyone thinks he is. And bless him, I actually quite feel sorry for him. I think he's been completely manipulated into believing in he's something he's not. I don't think he's an evil person. I think he's bought into he's vulnerable. Autistic children. I have an autistic nephew, and I know that you have contact with children that have autism as well. They don't have any understanding of how people are manipulating and using them. And I think he's been absolutely used, and Zuckerberg and a lot of these guys as well. They purposely target these guys. So I have a lot of empathy for him because he was abused by his dad. Quite clearly, he was a nasty piece of work, and you can see that in the interviews he still is. And his mum smothered him, and he just doesn't know coming or going. Just tell me who I am, type of thing. That's how you break these kids down. So I think he's been massively abused. But he's the Tesla front person. He's the X Club poster boy. That's exactly who is the eugenics. But what is really fascinating is you say the free energy then straight away. And what I'm thinking when you're saying it, with all of these burnings of these Teslas and attack on Tesla, it makes Elon Musk seem like the victim. Everyone feels sorry for him. But when you look into the Kabbalah and take that principle, the first coming is always chaos. The sun was chaos. The world was chaos before it was order. So the first batch of Teslas being chaotically taken apart would give birth to the new free energy Teslas. And I'm just wondering if they're using that principle there to set up, this is our new range and these ones are free energy and you'll get them at a knockdown price and all of this stuff. And these are the ones that survive. These are the, you know what I mean? They do that with Eve. She was Lilith first and she wouldn't lay under Adam, and then he got rid of her for a bit. And then came out with Eve, who did. She was the improved version. They want to do that with Adam. We're the Adam, the Edomites. They want to bring out their 2.0 transhuman. It's always the second coming, isn't it? So it's the second portion. It's the world to come. It's the replacement therapy. Is therapy theory. There's something I wanted to bring up here about the Ark of the Covenant. I did a video on these guys. These were called the Kohathites. I'm sure you've heard of them. They're one of the main divisions of the Levites in biblical times, who are one of the 12 tribes of Israel. So they came from the house of David. So they would be this, Kabbalistic side. If we're looking at that, they would be these guys that inherited the bloodline, although Jacob stole it from Esau. But they were one of those guys because obviously Israel was Jacob before and he changed his name. One of the tribes of Israel were called the Levites, and within that tribe there were a group of high priests called the Kohathites. Now these Kohathites were the only ones that was allegedly, again, I'm not saying if this actually happened, but look at the principles, and you say the Twilight language and the metadata, able to handle the Ark of the Covenant and carry it without being fried, basically. And they could put their hands on the mercy seat without their eyes popping out. And they say it's down to possibly their blood type. And then when you get into the RH negative blood type, the copper levels, if that's still is a thing. And the fact that you've got the Rosemary's Baby, are they trying to create a tribe of Kohathites that will be able to use this technology without frying themselves, or at least live with this technology in this new world they're creating with all of this Wi-Fi? It's interesting, isn't it? I think there's something there.
Oh, most definitely. Even if it's just on a symbolic level, it's definitely present. And all of those things you just said, it totally lines up, and it's totally fascinating because it's all at the crux of this. So we have Tesla, that's another archetype that's been invoked early on in the beginning part of this year, because that was actually one of the things that happened on these dual events that happened on January 1st here in America, where not only did you have the guy running his electric pickup truck, which it wasn't a Tesla, but he ran his electric pickup truck that he rented from the same company that the other guy rented the Tesla pickup truck from. And that happened in Vegas. You have these two events. So there was this vehicle fire in front of a Trump Tower in Vegas on January 1st, concurrent with that. And both these guys had military connections. It never ends with this stuff. And they both rented their electric truck from a company called Turo, which means tower. So you have the two towers being represented there again. It's all the same symbolism all across the board with this stuff. And that was the first invocation of torching a Tesla, January 1st, 2025. And since then, what do we see going on now? It's almost like they engineer this stuff on purpose with this type of symbology in mind. So now you have people out there torching Tesla trucks. And why is this? If ostensibly these are the people that truly care about things like climate change and stuff like that, why are they destroying these vehicles that are supposed to stave off that whole notion of things? So they're operating counter to what their belief systems are to begin with. And it's all because of politics, or at least that's what they would want you to believe on the surface, even though that doesn't make sense. So they've promulgated all of this stuff, and we certainly see the chaos that's been invoked because of it. And of course, they're using the fires of purification to bring order out of that chaos. It's always the same old tropes with these people. They do call themselves the philosophers of fire, and they use fire as their calling card. It's a fingerprint for them. See, we're doing this operation. There's always fire involved with a lot of this stuff. So now you know a little something on the symbolic level about that. So we see the connection of the dots here. This Tesla free energy connection, once again, as well. Electricity, lightning, the lightning bolt from the sky, Lucifer, the Lucifer principle. They all connect the dots with this stuff. The lightning bolt, the electric power, all being related to that. And of course, you have this connection back to the Ark of the Covenant once again, where it was said that only the tribe of the Levites were able to handle it without being fried. And it touches back on the things we were just talking about earlier, like how it's presented by the History Channel, how it might be some type of a capacitor. And they look at this stuff, and plus, that also brings to mind another Egyptian iconography point that relates to free energy. Well, they'll tell you things like the Baghdad battery were in use in Egypt, in ancient Egypt. This is a type of energy source. And they have those depictions of hieroglyphs with the giant light bulb. I'm sure you've seen that. If you watch the History Channel, they go through this stuff on that Ancient Aliens show a lot. And that show has been on for a very, very long time now. And that's not by accident. This is one of the primary programming tools that they've been using in the modern era to introduce these ideas to people's minds in a way that people find a little bit more palatable for our modern senses. So they'll present to you this stuff as being aliens or ancient astronauts and stuff involved with it when they know that's not what this really is. This is all coded language. And I assure you, some of those producers and stuff from that show understand that very much. They're presenting you with a false front, a fantasy based reality based upon these archetypes that are present, these occult archetypes that's suited to your more modern sensibilities. Let's put it that way. Now, do they all know about it? Probably not. That's the way this works. It's all compartmentalized information. But I assure you, somebody in the production of that show knows what they're doing. And there's a reason why this show in particular has been on air for over 20 years now. And it has to do with affecting the human mind in certain ways. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's when we're talking about this twilight language, and you can't get away from when you're talking about the Ark of the Covenant of three energy and arc of electricity. So, what would the arc of electricity be if you were talking about the Ark of a Covenant that you made with someone? Well, let's listen to this. So, in the biblical story of Noah's Ark, God established a covenant with Noah. Noah, that means Noah's bloodline and all living creatures. So that doesn't mean us, it means Noah's bloodline and the animals, signifying his promise to never again destroy the earth with a flood. And the rainbow became the sign of the covenant. What is a rainbow? It's an arc of electricity. The rainbow became is the rainbow the arc of the covenant? Is that what it is? Is that what's produced as a sign or a way of connecting in with some other god they believe they're talking to? Is the Ark of the Covenant not a box? Or it's a box that can produce a rainbow like when the Queen died in England, she had two rainbows. It was over Buckingham Palace. You can Google it. It was a confirmation of the covenant made by God. And they made those rainbows happen, obviously, because there was no coincidence they happened. So, is the Ark of the Covenant a rainbow, not a machine, or a machine that can change? the way you see reality, which are the colors of the spectrum. There's something we're getting to here. I feel like we're digging in the right direction, at least.
Well, I would say overarching all of that, the idea in and of itself of the Ark of the Covenant is an archetype. Ark, archetype. See,
Mhm.
and there's more involved here. When you're thinking, especially in terms of free energy, well, what's an arc in energy? Well, you see, this is where you have those two antennas, and you see that little bolt of electricity that goes up and down between them. Do you know what this device is called, Richard? It's called a Jacob's ladder.
Yeah.
And therein is another connection back to biblical iconography as well. So we have the arc, and we have the electric field, and we have all of these things interrelated in many different ways, and it's all symbolic language. And it's very hard to piece together the puzzle pieces here to arrive at a firm conclusion about all of this. But you can see how the language has been manipulated and how the symbology has always been present in our faces. So there's some energetic principle at play here that's being leveraged in certain ways. And I suspect it has something to do with a portion of our reality that they would like us to not even discuss or talk about or even believe in. And this is called the ether. And the existence of the ether was actually proven out in the Michelson Morley experiment that they used to try to defame the whole thing. You see, they had the apparatus turned the wrong way in their initial experiment, and there have been others who came along later that have been able to turn the apparatus 90 degrees and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is an etheric field that exists. And this was done in New Zealand, and what was it called? Liquid gravity. You could look up liquid gravity New Zealand, and you should be able to arrive at the research papers about this. So all of this stuff has been proven. And this is part of our energy concepts that's not discussed in mainstream modern physics. But there is a special off the books physics that's acknowledged in the Black budget community, the Black projects community, special access programs. They know about this, and they know it has everything to do with producing this free energy, or they would like to call it this quantum field energy or quantum vacuum energy, 0 point energy. You've heard all of these things discussed
Mhm.
before. But in order to understand how to access that and develop technologies to use that, first you have to rethink the way you accept reality. And it's not through Einstein's principles that they try to hand us and say this is the cutting edge of physics and this is what we know and they've proven this and that. Well, when you understand ether physics is at the core and crux of the development of a lot of these new technologies that could be transformative to the world that they've kept under wraps, because if you could introduce this concept to people, if people learn all of a sudden you can have a free energy device to power all of your needs, well, that takes away their control and monopoly on energy. And if they don't have a control or monopoly on energy, then you could do things. You won't have any type of scarcity. You will have abundance. You will be able to have everything you need powered by a very small device. All of your home's energy needs could be produced by a very small device with few, if any, moving parts that generate free energy. And these technologies exist in the Black budget community, but they don't want the public to have access to them because the entire structure of world power would fall apart were this to happen. Because right now we depend upon what they call fossil fuels for everything. We have all these big energy companies, all of this. And Nikola Tesla was on the verge of divulging some of this in the early 1900s when his benefactor, J.P. Morgan, pulled the plug on all of it when he was building his Wardenclyffe Tower in New York. Tesla pretty much informed him, hey, we could have wireless electricity broadcast around the world for everybody to use for free. But JP Morgan famously said, how do I put a meter on that? And then he shut down all of his funding to Tesla's programs. And this didn't become realized. But we do have the remnants of that in use today. We have wireless networks that's all based on these Tesla technologies. Same thing. You could send wireless signals through this. You could do the same thing with electricity. Tesla knew this. He proved it. He proved it. He did experiments back in Colorado Springs where he built a Tesla tower and he was able to wirelessly transmit electricity over the course of many different miles. Over, I think it was 50 miles, a 50-mile away place where he was able to wirelessly transmit electricity and light up light bulbs, not attached to anything, just out there safely. He was onto something with this, and now our modern science is just beginning to rediscover this stuff. At least that's what they'll tell you. But this has actually been a concept used in secret military industrial complex programs for many years. So they know how to do this stuff. The technologies already exist for it. They're just not being forthright with it. So we need to keep that in mind, and there's always this connection to it, but it ties to this ether field that they don't want us to know or believe exists. So that's a mouthful. I'd love to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts.
The ether is I think some people will call it the fifth element. Is that basically the matrix, the kind of, as you see the if you want to visualize it as the wave of the digits of the matrix. You are living in it. It's the soup that we live in, and we are all connected to. I always say that we are the free energy. We always will be. There's no that's who we are. And I think a lot of this, all you got to do is rub a balloon, and you can tell that you have that electric in you. So I think they're powering it off us, and I think that's the mythologies of the archons and all of these things, and the moon taking the sun's light. They all come back to it. I wonder if these things that they found out, that they supposedly found, which I wouldn't, I would probably more inclined to agree with you, that this is all they aren't there, but this is all Twilight language or power of suggestion, are Jacob's ladder. That's exactly what they're referring to underneath there, is what that is, that electrical current, and they were either able to use it, or these things are just hinting towards it, as you say. And then who was it that found Tesla's papers? Found his papers in his hotel on his deathbed when he died? Was it Donald Trump's uncle or something like that?
Yep, that's exactly who it was, and he was tasked with taking into possession all of Tesla's papers and everything he had in his hotel room at that time. And a lot of that stuff has now found its way to the Tesla Museum over in, I believe it's Austria, where he was from. No, it's not Austria. I can't remember where the museum is at, but they have a lot of this stuff. And I've actually done broadcasts in the past about many of these secret papers that came from Tesla and that kind of thing as well. The things that are covered in that. But I find it interesting that there was so much there that was confiscated at that point, and people don't know all that was confiscated because at first it was, I think his name was John Trump. It's Trump's uncle, who
Hmm.
was one of the ones involved with that whole thing. And the CIA took into possession all of Tesla's stuff, but it was later released because the other country where he was from decided that they wanted to try to get all of his stuff so that they could put it in that Tesla museum there. And it's certainly there, and people could Google that. I don't know why my mind's blanking on that because this is something I have studied extensively, but I guess there's only so much room up here for stuff. So I do forget things on occasion, but people could
Is
look
it
that up. It's out there.
another thing I found that was really interesting, that rainbow in Hebrew, the word for it is let me just have a quick look. It's keshet, but actually what it means is bow. It's called the war bow. So rainbow means war bow, which is interesting of itself, isn't it? When you really think about it, there is something to do with this spectrum. And when you look at, I think it's CNBC's logo, it's the inversion of the light spectrum. So they're telling you they're inverting reality and showing you the inversion of the truth. They're telling you these things. And what is wonderful about this show that we do, and learning from you, I learned a lot from you. I was talking about your work last night in a show that I was doing, and your books and all the stuff that you've looked into, is that we're starting to learn this language. And what is even better about that is that I think these guys know that people on mass are starting to learn this language, and they have to stick to that language. That's the big thing. It's like a coded system. Once it's figured out, they still have to stick to it. And it has been figured out. That's why they're ramping it up really quickly. The old men in black down there in Habad Lubavitch with their black hats and their satin hats have been caught. It's just enough people being able to latch onto it. But the great thing is, guys, and to Phil, some positivity is that the fact is they have to stick to this language, they have to stick to the game plan. It's prophecy to them. They have to fulfill it. So once you figure it out, they don't have anywhere to go, and they're only going to prove us right as time goes. Now it's just, to me, this has been about for the last couple of years understanding this stuff, although I've been doing this for 15 years. Really understanding this stuff is about damage limitation. They're not going to get the things they want. It's ridiculous, but they're hurting. Look what they've done in Gaza. Look what they've done in the Middle East. Look what they did in Iraq. Look what they're doing all over the world, and just people living in poverty that shouldn't be in the UK. Like, they're hurting people all over the world, and it doesn't have to be this way. And it's damage limitation, because these nutters aren't going to get what they want. They're going to hurt a lot of people in the process.
Absolutely. And that's where they're at right now. They're scrambling. They're trying
Yeah.
to actually push as much of the agenda as they can forward and just taking what little victories that they can here and there. And they don't care who they hurt in the process. And that's the whole problem that we have. They recognize there are some of us that are figuring it out now. And we're trying to put out tools out there to help people to better see through their facades. But they're still depending on that much coveted parietal split in the population. It's that 20/80 parietal split that they need. If more than 20% of the population picks up on this, it's game over for them. So now they're doing damage control and they're trying to limit the reach of shows like this. And we're seeing they're getting a lot of pushback now because of that. They've censored us. They've done a good job censoring us for at least the past, I would say, 5 years, more than that, probably going back to 2018 is when they really started clamping down with the censorship on things. So probably about the past 7 years now, they've been censoring this stuff pretty good and keeping us in our own little private echo chambers. But now we're beginning to reach more people because people inherently realize something's wrong and they might not be able to put their finger on that. But the human being is intuitive, and that's part of the gift that we have from God, our gift of free will and this intuitive nature, this divine spark that we have within us, so that we do recognize when something's askew here, when the energies aren't quite right. It's our intuition. And people have that intuition, but they can't connect the dots because they haven't been taught these points that they utilize from their secret doctrine and they use to control people. They leverage these energetic principles against people all the time. So once you're aware of them and you have a broader view of this, then you could really begin to see the forest for the trees. And that's where they've kept us. They've kept us compartmentalized, not understanding some of these concepts that they use, many of these occult tools that they use. They've trained and indoctrinated most of us to think that stuff is silly and nonsensical and there's nothing to it. Things like astrology, the position of the stars in the sky. I think it goes without saying that you can emphatically prove that things in the sky have an effect here on Earth. Look, for example, at the sun and the moon. The moon, they say, affects the tides. The sun certainly influences life on Earth. It changes the seasons. It has to do with the change of seasons and everything. It's empirically observable that these objects in the sky do have an effect here, that they do produce energies that they transmit here to the Earth. And to think that there's nothing to that, as we've been indoctrinated to believe, is fallacy. And therefore, they could manipulate these energetic principles against us because we're not even aware that they're there. They've taken all of that teaching away from us. They've taken away classical education. They don't teach us mythology anymore. And there are so many things that are inherent in the stories of mythology, natural principles, natural energies, natural systems that we can understand in a better way by knowing these stories that they've taken away from us. And we don't focus on those things anymore. And therefore, we miss out on the synchromystic metadata that they use out there in the field to communicate secretly and to manipulate our unconscious mind with the archetype because we don't recognize it. But that's what we're here to try to remedy, Richard. That's what our mission is here, to help people better see this so they have a better, clearer understanding of what's going on. And oftentimes that looks like human intuition, and you shouldn't disregard your intuition. But they've programmed us by and large to disregard our intuition and depend only on what they call reason or logic or intellect for these things. And this is all our modern scientific paradigm that they've engineered. But certainly there's more to it than that. There's a spiritual component that most people have been engineered to ignore. And that's what we're focused on.
Absolutely. It's been a lovely show, fantastic show. Where, Wayne, can people find your work and learn more about this important information? If there's no more information important than this, than decoding these lunatics and what they're saying to each other, because it's so obvious once you can.
Yeah, people could find me at www.alchemicaltechrevolution.com.
And you can find my video work mostly at iconic.com, and you can find my Substack at Some May Conspire on substack.com, and support our work there. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Please remember to share and like this show, because there's nothing else out there like this.